All right, so I should have introduced myself. I'm Heather Darby. I am an agronomist here at the University of Vermont, and my son is here today too, moping around because there's no school right now up here in Elberg where I live. And I'm going to be one of your instructors for the course. And we have lots of other people on the call too that will be assisting you throughout the program. And some of those folks work for the University of Vermont, and some of those folks work for the Vermont Conservation Districts. And some of those folks work for NRCS. Week 5 and 6 are really meant to be weeks focused on finishing up the plan. And week 5 is generally a week we just spend making sure that you have completed everything that needs to go into the plan. You know, if there's any big problems, we're trying to fix those in week 5. And then on week 6 is when we really want to spend some time reviewing the plan and getting it certified. So I'm really the person that needs to review and put a stamp of approval on every single plan. So the better shape they come to me in, the faster that process goes. So again, those last couple of weeks are just getting the plan in final order. So then we can review it and approve it, and hopefully you're done by week 6. Jeff Carter's on here too, I believe, but Jeff and I have been teaching nutrient management here at UVM Extension for over 20 years. This class itself, you know, providing farmers the ability to write their own plans, I've been teaching since 2006. So we got a little bit of experience doing it. It's evolved over the years, but it's been a great way for farmers to be able to learn more about nutrient management, soils, soil testing, fertility management, and then also be able to put their own plan together and meet the requirements of the state and federal government. So it has been a useful class to a lot of people. Taking the class is work, as you can tell. You got to show up every week. You know, the data entry, depending on the size of your farm, can take a lot of time. But once everything is there, once you've created the plan, maintaining and updating it is relatively easy. So I would encourage everybody to do that. You're supposed to, but not everybody does. But once it's in the program that we use, it really is there forever. So again, I already talked about this. We're going to meet once a week virtually, same time, same Zoom link for the next 4 weeks. The last 2 weeks, again, are really kind of wrapping up the plan, dealing with any issues that might have occurred, which do occur over those last 2 weeks, so that hopefully by week 6, we are wrapping this up. And I want to stress how important it is to really try to finish it up in the 6 weeks, because I will say that we still have a couple of outstanding plans from doing this same class last year. And so, you know, if we don't finish in that 6 weeks, sometimes it just drags on. And you folks, we're busy, you know, we start doing other things, and this doesn't become a priority anymore. So again, I just encourage you all to put the time in, get the help you need, and get it done over the next 6 weeks. All right, we're going to complete the work in a program. It's a computer program called Go Crop. And Go Crop is a program that was developed with my program here at UVM. And again, we've been using it 15 years, maybe, for quite a long time. And, you know, so it does cost money. Everybody, you've all been briefed on that. Many of you, I believe, have the program cost shared this year or paid for. It does cost $100 each year or $50, depending on the size of your farm, to renew the license on Go Crop. Now, you're right, it is a tool of UVM. why does it cost money? Well, once you start using it, you'll see it's complicated and we have to pay an outside developer to keep it current. And, you know, as you know, the regulations are always changing, the requirements, and computers and software. So we're constantly having to make changes to it. So it does cost money. So we charge enough to keep it up and going. So we'll be using Go. It's a web application, which means you're not going to download anything on your computer. You're going to go to the GoCrop website, which we'll go to today, and you'll be going to now every day, or I'm sorry, every week. If you go to it every day, that'd be good. I don't know a lot of people that do, but I'd be impressed. So you'll go to the website, you'll log in, and you'll see your farm, and you'll work with your farm each week. So you don't need any special software, but what you do need is Google Chrome, if anybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that, or Firefox. You know, those are the web browsers, we call them, that work really well with GoCrop. So we'll want to make sure that you have those web browsers on one of those web browsers on your computer. And Lindsay could correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the Microsoft web browsers, like Microsoft Edge, there's an older one too, Windows Explorer, I think.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
The Windows Explorer and Microsoft Edge are not very compatible with GoCrop, so you might run into some issues using it at that point, or with those browsers.
Great.
Google Chrome, just to reiterate what you're saying, Heather, is the preferred browser to use.
All right. So if you have no idea what we're talking about right now, we'll help you get Google Chrome on your computer so that you can get the best GoCrop experience. All right. So again, it's a web application, which means your data is safe. It's actually stored at another farm that's called a server, or a data farm, a server farm that we pay through UVM to house the information of GoCrop. It's very secure. We pay for all the security with it. And the only person that has access to your GoCrop files are you, right? You're going to create a unique login and password, and you're the only one that can access that, right? The state can't access it. We can't access it. The people you're working with can't access it. Only you. Now, the only way we can access your farm information is if you provide us with the login and password, okay? So it is your information, secure to you. There's nobody that's going to be in there poking around, looking at what you're doing. There's no way that that is possible unless you provide us your information. And the only reason you would do that, or we would ask for that, is so that we can help you. So if you call us up and you say, you know, Heather, I'm really having trouble with this piece, I might say, well, can you share your screen, or will you let me log in? And then I can, you know, see what's happening. All right, so it is secure, your information. And now saying that, that means you need to keep track of your login information. So we provide a little piece of paper in the notebook to write that down. And of course, if you lose it, you can request to change the password just like on anything else. But it is your responsibility to remember what your password is and what email you used to create the account. An added bonus of GoCrop is that is also available as a mobile application. So you're able to use it on an iPad or your iPhone or your Android device, right? So you can actually, I wouldn't recommend writing a plan on your iPhone. I don't know if anybody's done that, but as far as keeping records afterwards, you can keep them right from your smartphone or an iPad. You don't have to log into the computer. You can use your mobile device and do that. Okay. I have here that we'll have additional help sessions on Monday. This was from last year. I'm actually not sure if we planned on that. Sarah's I can only see Sarah's face. She's laughing. I have a feeling no, but we're available. So we're here to help. All right. There's also additional resources, all the videos and the classes, everything is going to be posted online. So if you shouldn't miss a class, but if for some reason you do, the classes will be recorded and you can listen to them on your own. If you didn't understand something, you can go back and re-listen to them. So they will be available, and I'll show you the website in a minute. And then we also have this really great manual that I have a little picture of. You should have got a copy of that in your binder. And this is like your course book. This is your textbook for the class. And I always joke that it was actually written by someone recording the classes and then writing them almost verbatim to what we talk about. And so if you get confused or lost, just go to the textbook. It goes class by class, and it can help you, learn a little more. It's great evening reading. I'm sure you're all laughing at my jokes. You know, every once in a while, if somebody could just smile, like Sarah's in my viewfinder. So now my this computer doesn't want to work. I feel like I might be jinxed. Is that a thing? Oh, that's right. Using a keyboard that goes to the computer that doesn't work. All right, here we go. Okay, so the information from the class, the training manual, some of the other resources, and the recorded classes are going to be available online. The website is on this slide. Maybe Lindsay or Sarah could type it into the chat here. And I believe Susan can send it out as well, so everybody has it handy if you need to re-listen to the lectures or get, some of the resources. All right, press the right keyboard. Now, everybody should have their binder by now. This is, again, also the class, kind of the class workbook. Mine's probably not as beautiful as yours. There's a big white binder. Everything in the binder is needed. I always say just whatever's in there, keep it in there. There are certain things you may think, I don't really need that. I'm just going to throw that out. Again, whatever's in there, keep in there. It's likely there for a reason. There are sort of some other paperwork requirements of an NMP that are required to be in here. So everybody should have received a binder with the class schedule, what we'll be covering each week, the class textbook, and all the other information that you will need for the class. When we are finished entering all of your farm data into GoCrop, you're going to want to print that out or work with your the person that's helping you with the plan to get it printed out and in to this binder. You are required to have a hard copy of this plan on your farm. Okay, so if you are going to get inspected or you have been inspected by the state of Vermont, they're going to want this hard copy. Okay, and I know a lot of farmers have said, well, can't you just look in my GoCrop? And no, they're not going to look in your GoCrop. They're going to flip through your binder and they're going to look at your plan in here. So it's really important, again, to print off your final plan and get it into this binder. In addition to the materials that you'll be putting into GoCrop, in that binder, you also need hard copies of your soil tests. Okay, you need current copies of manure tests. You need all of the required maps, which you should have at this point. You're going to need these Vermont soil fact sheets that describe each soil type on your farm. You're going to need these RUSLE2 numbers, which we're going to go over here, and some other important documents, as I mentioned before, that also need to be in this binder. All right. So again, once we're done, all this stuff has to go in the binder, and then you have a final NMP. And that NMP needs to be on your farm as a hard copy if you get inspected. Okay. Feel like I've said the same thing 3 or 4 times. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? All right, we'll just keep going. Or comments by other people that realize she didn't say something.
Actually, can you put that last slide back up so that I was writing down the list of stuff for the binder?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep. Now we will go through.
Crop is all.
What's that?
Grow crop's a lot easier than when you first started, when it was all
Yeah,
by
that is
paper.
true. Yeah, it keeps getting better. Easier to use. Okay. Now there is a piece of paper in the binder. So if you look through it, you'll see there's tabs, you know, but behind each tab we'll be putting information. There may already be information there. Okay. But there is a sheet in the binder that says what goes behind every single tab, what should be there. Okay. And these are mostly for the Go Crop reports. Once you start printing those off, when you're done, it tells you where to put them in the binder. And we'll be helping you with that, which will be easier to do now if we can meet in person, you know, those last classes. All right. And again, there is a course agenda that's in the binder, and it goes through, you know, what we're going to cover each class. You can read ahead of time. Some people like to do that, reading the textbook. Some people just don't have time to do it, and I understand that. It is a good read. I actually had recently one of the farms that came through this class shockingly was recommending the textbook to other farmers to read. So there's a lot of really great basic soil management information in there. Okay. Pressing the wrong keyboard. Okay. Lindsay put the link in there for everybody. And again, we'll make sure when Susan sends out a reminder that she puts that link. So if people want to go and listen to my annoying voice again for an hour, you can. Okay. Nutrient management. You know, what are we doing here? What's the goal of the class? The goal of all of this? People definitely ask, why are we doing this? Why do we have to do this? I think, you know, as farmers, you should look at taking this. I'm trying not to laugh, but I'm really serious when I say this, but you know, it's hard to take time out of your day. I understand that, but this is a real opportunity. I really, to learn what you're going to learn in this class, especially, I mean, at any point in your farming career, I think will be really valuable to you. I don't think we've ever have had a farmer take this class and say they didn't enjoy what they learned. And that doesn't mean that those people in this class are going to be now going, well, I'll be the first to say that. But there's a lot of really valuable information. And just talking to Jeff Sanders, one of my colleagues here that some of you might know, and I said, do you have a recent nitrogen fertilizer cost price that you can give me? And I'm sure if anybody's buying fertilizers, they know the cost of fertilizer right now is off the charts. And really the goal of this class is to utilize the nutrients you have on your farm so that you can supplement with commercial fertilizer. Okay. that you're not using commercial fertilizer as your primary nutrient source. So you're taking credit for the manure that you have on your farm, the legumes that you might have on your farm, other organic amendments that you might be producing, compost, etc., and using those to meet the nutrient needs of the crop before you go out and spend money on commercial fertilizer. You know, it's going to help you understand where to invest those dollars. Now, the amount of money you have for fertilizer is probably the same amount of money you had last year, but it's only going to go half as far because the price is double, okay, if not triple. I brought up an old presentation. I don't know what year it was from, but nitrogen was 20 cents a pound. So that tells you how long I've been teaching this class. I had to update it. Okay, so pay attention, you know, really take the credit from that manure, understand how it works, learn how to get the most out of it, and trust it. You know, trust that the manure has nutrients and it can feed your crops, but understand the limitations so that you can add fertilizer where needed. And really, from a farmer's perspective, you know, that's going to be of high value to you. Now, why the state wants you to do this, and the federal government and other people, is because we want to make sure that you're minimizing nutrient loss from your farm. And that's good for you too, right? I mean, if you have manure nutrients and you're losing half of them from how you're managing it, then your crops aren't getting those either. And then you need to go buy some fertilizer. Okay, so minimizing loss is very important to protecting the water and the environment around us, but it's also important for financial viability on your farm. You need to keep what you paid for on that farm for your crops to use. Okay, so again, the goal, take the nutrients you have on your farm, understand those nutrients, feed them to your crops the best that you can, supplement with other outside nutrient sources if you want to, if you can afford to, all those things, and do that at the same time as you're minimizing nutrient losses. And that's more or less the whole thing. And it sounds really simple just saying it, but it's quite complicated. Said go down, slide, you're not going down. There we go. Okay, so again, nutrient management is complex. You know, some of you have paid people to do this for you for good reason. When you start doing it yourself, you'll be like, oh yes, that is why I've paid somebody to do this for me. It's complicated, you know, it takes time. But I do believe that, as I said before, you knowing this information is really going to help you make this work for your farm. And there's a lot to it, you know, it's not just how much NPKs in the manure and how much NPKs in the fertilizer I need to buy. There's a lot of steps that we have to take to create the plan to help you get the most out of those nutrients. And here's just kind of a short list. It actually goes on, but you know, for the sake of time, we won't show them all. But these are some of the components that we're going to be talking about and thinking about as we develop your plan. You know, how do we incorporate manure into the soil quickly so that we retain the nutrient value? You know, how do we continue to enhance organic matter and the structure and biology of your soil so that nutrients cycle quicker and more efficiently in your soils? How do you use legumes, you know, clover and alfalfa and white clover, to maximize the productivity of those fields, of those grasses? So there's a lot to nutrient management planning. So I've talked already a lot about why going through this process, why writing this plan on your own in particular is really important. And, you know, the top three are economics, environmental concerns, and public relations. And there's more, you know, probably the big one at the bottom that will come up at a couple slides from now is regulation. But if you look at this from a perspective of this is going to help my farm and I need to save money on fertilizer and grow better crops, that's a great reason to be here. So this is the slide that I updated that I had like 20 cents a pound for, for nitrogen on, and I couldn't believe how much it changed. So we're looking at $1 a pound for nitrogen, which actually is pretty much right in line. I don't know if there are any farmers on the call if you buy sodium nitrate or Chilean nitrate, but this is what Chilean nitrate costs a pound. And I think it used to be 50 cents a pound, but that's probably gone up as well. So anytime natural gas prices go up, fertilizer prices go up, right? Because it's a process that uses a lot of natural gas. So we know the price of fuel, the price of gas is really high. And as a result, fertilizer prices are going to be really high as well. So using what you have on your farm, like I mentioned before, is even more important right now. So I just took something really basic here. So if you have alfalfa on your farm or red clover or white clover, legumes, right? They contain a lot of nitrogen. They make nitrogen. We'll talk about that in a couple of classes. But if you plow under, I shouldn't say plow because we're trying to get people not to plow, but if you terminate 50 acres of alfalfa, a good alfalfa stand, you're going to get 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre from that. And that has a value of $6,000, right? At $1 a pound. And with manure nitrogen, you know, if your cow's producing 27 tons of manure a year, and you're getting 5 pounds of N per ton, which is very conservative, by the way, you know, your cows are making milk and they're making nitrogen, right? Or pooping it out anyway. So, you know, this is dollars, real dollars that can help you reduce your fertilizer costs. You know, properly fertilizing your fields also improves forage quality and forage biomass. And, you know, unfortunately, maybe shockingly to most of the public, a lot of fields are under fertilized in Vermont. You know, that's certainly not the story that we hear. They're under fertilized, or I would say they're sort of misfertilized, if that makes sense. So you may be putting fertilizer on them, but because you're not looking at your soil tests and understanding what they really need, you're sort of putting on whatever. And that's not helping those plants. So fertilizing those crops and taking care of the soil to really give the crop what it needs is going to produce more feed of a higher quality. And that can also improve the economics on your farm, right? If you have better quality feed and more of it, I'm assuming many of you are going to have to buy less supplement. And this was a study that my colleagues conducted where they just went out on field on one of their university research farms, and they amended it with the proper, you know, soil amendments that were required. And you can see the change in the relative feed quality versus where they didn't do that. Okay. But does that make a difference, right? Was there a return on investment? So maybe it cost them more than what they got back. Okay. Here are the changes in pounds of milk per ton of feed. Again, when you have high producing, really high quality feed, because you've taken care of those soils, you're going to end up with better feed, having to purchase less supplement, healthier cows, all those things. Okay. So a lot of value in taking care of those soils. And I will say that it's really expensive to not pay attention to what the soils need. You know, in the short term, when fertilizer prices are high, sometimes you can, you know, go without for a year. We'll hopefully be able to help you decide that, right? Where to prioritize. Where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? Okay, especially in years where fertilizer prices are really high, sometimes we have to make those decisions. But letting fertility go on fields for years makes those fields very unproductive, but also really expensive to bring back, right? So the longer you go without properly fertilizing, the more expensive it becomes over time to make those fields productive again. Okay. All right. So let's talk about environmental concerns. So I already mentioned we want to fertilize to get the best crops that we can. That doesn't always mean you need a lot of fertilizer. Sometimes it does. It's really paying attention to all the different pieces, you know, which fields need it, what crops are you growing, etc. Now, at the same time as we feed the crops, we want to make sure those nutrients that we're putting on the field and the nutrients that are in the soil already stay there. You know, they get used by the crop and they don't become a source of pollution. And that is, you know, money down the drain. I don't care how you look at it. You've made an investment in the land, whether you bought fertilizer, you know, you're applying manure, you're paying payments to the bank on that land. Why in the world would you want to lose anything from it? Right? It's yours. You paid for it. Don't let it get run off into the water. So from a farming perspective, it doesn't make any sense for you not to look at nutrient and soil runoff on your farm. It's a losing proposition for you economically. And in addition to that, it's also a losing proposition for the water, you know, recreation, wildlife, etc. Now, it's hard to always put an eye on that, but that's what we're going to do in this class. And I hope you see the value of keeping those nutrients and soil on the land that you bought and you paid for and probably still are paying for every day. It does not make any sense as a farmer to not pay attention to this. And we will be trying to address losses. You know, we're going to work with different tools to try to understand what the risk is of the management that you're using to the surrounding water. And we're going to try to minimize that risk through management. Okay. And that's not anything people should be afraid of. A lot of it is just, you know, common sense, and things that when you see it, you'll be like, yeah, right. Why? Of course, that's what I'll do. But we will be paying close attention to this, trying to minimize nutrient loss to surface water. So rivers, lakes, ponds, ditches, to groundwater, right? So that's the water people drink, and then into the air as well. And, you know that we're trying to minimize greenhouse gas losses, especially nitrous oxide, into the atmosphere. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then also volatilization. You don't want to lose fertilizer value into the air either. So we'll be looking at all of those during class. Relatively new to the class, we are also going to be looking at risk from tile. And if you don't have tile on your farm, especially pattern tile drainage, then of course, you know, we won't evaluate that on your farm. But if you do have pattern tile, we use a tool called the phosphorus index, and it basically will look at risk of phosphorus loss through the tile. And we do try to manage for that now, and that's not something we did in the past. All right. So public relations, again, here's just a picture of busy road, a farm, people driving by, people seeing things, people not understanding things, not understanding what you're doing or even up against. Whether we like it or not, we're in the public's eye, and most of the public today knows nothing about farming. I mean, nothing. My sister works in the lunch program in Alberg, which is a very rural community, as you all know. And the kids there don't even know that bacon comes from a pig, that, corn or French fries or potatoes. I mean, it's just unbelievable that people are so far removed from food production, but it is reality. And knowing what you're doing on your farm to protect the environment is really important. Being able to talk about it, being able to share it, being able to talk about your nutrient management plan to the people around you is really important. Whether you want to do it or not, whether you like it or not, it's the way society is today. So again, gaining this knowledge is helpful on a lot of levels. Lastly, I'll end with regulation. It's probably why a lot of people are here, why most people come to the class at the end of the day, because they have to. But usually by the time they're done, they've seen the bigger value in spending the time and working through the process. But most farms here all farms are regulated. I should start with that in the state of Vermont. All farmers need to follow the required agricultural practices. If you are not familiar with those, they've been in place for a little while now, so you should brief yourself on those. We will cover a lot of them in class, and part of writing the nutrient management plan meets some of those standards, but not all of them. There are some wonderful documents that the Agency of Agriculture has created to educate farmers about those requirements. If you're unfamiliar with those, we'll make sure you get that information so that you're up to date. Now, the type of plan that we're going to create in this class, as I've said, I think this will be the third time, meets the state regulatory requirements for certified small farm operations, medium farm operations, and large farm operations. Okay, so if you complete the plan, you'll be covered by this, for the state regulations. But I want to reiterate that writing this plan and having it on your farm is not the only RAP that needs to be met. And some of those requirements, are outside of this, really the focus of this class. So you should make sure that you get that information to make sure you're in compliance. The farms that get inspected are the certified small farms, the MFOs and the LFOs, and those are on different schedules. Small farms, not certified, are not, they will not necessarily get inspected unless there's some kind of public complaint, basically. Okay, all right. So this is the booklet I was talking about. I don't know, did this get put into the binder, Susan? She may not be on. I don't think it is. I don't see it in my binder, but it is available on the Agency of Ag website. And if it's not on our website, we can put it on there so that you have access to it. I think it used to be. All right. So now you're convinced you're doing the right thing. You're sitting here in class still because you have to, or maybe you want to. Now I'm just going to briefly go over the parts of a nutrient management plan. So the nutrient management plan that we're going to develop follows the 590 standard. And you can see a little picture of it here on the slide, but this standard is actually in your booklet, in your binder. And it goes through every part of the plan that we will be developing it. So it's, again, it's the standard. This is what we follow to write your plan. And if you're interested in every little gory detail, you can read the standard. It's interesting. There's actually some good information in there. It is a requirement to have the standard in your binder, and it is in here. So again, if you want to read up on all the process and requirements, it's there for you to look at. But again, this is what we follow and what you're required to follow. So just some highlights, you know, the 590 standard requires you to have a 25-foot perennial vegetative buffer along surface water. Okay, that's a requirement of the NMP standard, which also makes it a requirement of the state of Vermont. Most people hopefully already have these buffers in, but it is a requirement. And if you don't, you're not following the law. You have to have 10-foot perennial vegetated buffers along ditches on both sides. And you have to have a 100-foot buffer along surface water on fields that have an average 10% slope if they're in annual cropland. Right? Now, this will all be covered in the materials you have in your binder and with the folks that you're working for. So don't feel like you have to write this down. This will be coming up again when you're working with folks on writing your plan. There's also some requirements around setbacks for manure spreading, etc. From groundwater. So requirements for public wells versus private wells. And again, if you're not already familiar with those will come up as you're writing your plan if, again, they need to. You may not be near a public well. You have to have soil tests that are less than 2 years old to write a new plan. So you're all writing new plans. All of the soil tests that you're using cannot be any older than 2 years old. I think for most of you, they're all current. Okay, they were probably taken last fall, but they cannot be any older than 2 years old. After you write your initial plan, those soil tests need to be updated every 3 years, and that is a state requirement. Okay, you also need to use a very specific soil test, and this is called the modified Morgan's extractant. And I hope by now people out in the countryside know this, but if you don't have soil tests that use the modified Morgan's extractant, we cannot use them to develop a plan. So using the UVM lab or Agri-1, Dairy-1, those are the two primary labs that people use for soil tests. And with Agri-1, you have to check modified Morgan's. You have to say you're from Vermont, and they will use this extractant. All right, you're going to need crop information for every single field on your farm that you're including in the nutrient management plan. Right, so you're going to have to know the soil type. You're going to have to know the rotations that meet T. You're going to have to know where there may be other requirements, like I just talked about, those additional buffers. You're also going to need to have yields, yield goals. What kind of yields do you get off from those fields? You're going to need that information to write a plan. Some of this will be given to you. And other things you're going to have to bring to the table on your own. Okay, you're going to need to know how much manure is produced on your farm. You're going to have to know the storage type, etc. And then from all of that, we're going to create a nutrient budget. So again, some of this information is going to be done for you, and other parts you're going to need to have the information yourself. Okay, we're going to conduct a series of risk assessments to understand the potential for phosphorus and nitrogen loss and soil loss from each field on your farm. And there's requirements here. So we need to minimize soil loss. We need to minimize phosphorus loss. So we're going to run these risk assessments and see if your fields meet the standards. And if they don't, we have to figure out how to meet the standard. And that may mean modifying management. Right? The most exciting part are the field by field recommendations. Once we get in all of the soil information, the soil test information, the manure information, the risk information, then we start going field by field and figuring out what we're going to do on each field to manage nutrients, supply the crop what it needs, and minimize loss, field by field. So if you have a lot of fields, it's going to take time. Right? Okay. So that's everything that goes into the plan. That seemed really easy. I'm glad. It'll be easy. Okay. I don't even know what time it is. Anybody know what time it is? Probably way past. Oh, 11:30. Okay, perfect. We're getting close to the end. All right. So we're going to go through the maps. So you are required to have a series of maps that represent each various factors for each field on your farm. And the list of maps is in the binder. The list of maps that you need on this sheet that says NMP binder, reports and forms to be included. And if you go to that, it says maps tab. You're going to get the maps from your land treatment planner. So the person that you've likely been working with from either NRCS or the districts. So they will be giving you these maps. You may already have them. Okay, the list of the maps that you should have include the following. All right, you need a watershed and proximity map. Okay, these are combined. And if you have an impaired, if your farm is located in an impaired watershed, it may be included as well. Okay, so here's a picture of a watershed and proximity map, right? So it shows your farm, all of it, okay, in proximity to everything else around it. And then those long numbers there are the watershed codes. So it shows what watersheds your farm is in, right? So this is just an example here you can see. So you need to have this map. You'll need to include the watershed code in your plan. Okay. All right. So the next map is got all kinds of names, depends who you work with, but this one probably looks somewhat familiar to you. This is the Food Security Act map, or the conservation plan, or the land use map. But essentially what it does is it outlines each field. Okay, it gives it the FSA track and field number, the acreage. Some of them will have what crop you're growing on it, and then it identifies it as highly erodible or non-highly erodible. So most of you have probably seen these maps before for your farm. All right, kind of like FSA maps, basically. Okay, so you again need these maps for every field, track and field number that you're going to be putting into your plan. Okay, you need soils maps. And again, you have to have every field represented on the soils map. And these can look different depending on who made them. This is a beautiful colored one. You can see the fields. You can still see the outline of the fields, the acreage, and then underneath it, you can see all these different colors that relate back to different soil types. And just like every Vermont farm, there's usually 20, sometimes 30 different soil types on your farm. Okay, so you can see even in this little 7-acre field there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types in that field. Okay, and they're all really different. And then these relate back to the soil fact sheets I was talking about. Okay, so you'll have a soil fact sheet that describes each one of these soil types in your binder. So if you want to read up on them in gory detail, they are there for you. Okay, you'll have a this is a tongue twister, a frequently flooded map if you have frequently flooded fields. If you don't, you will not have this map. Okay, then you have these what are called a resource concern map or an environmental concerns map, one or the other. This shows buffers. It might show wetlands. It might show wells. You can see kind of these little blue circles up here. Those might show wells and identify setbacks for the wells. Okay, so sensitive areas, all those kinds of things get shown on this map. You may also have a Vermont farm buffer setback map that shows, and you can see on this one, where there's a 200-foot nutrient application setback from this public well. Okay. And some of you, probably all of you, if you've worked with NRCS or the land treatment planner, you may also have this Vermont farm practice map that shows practices that are recommended, or maybe you have signed up for, that have been assigned to certain fields. Okay, so you can see this field is having nutrient management, has cover crop and no-till. So again, depending on who you've worked with, may or may not have this particular map. If you are stacking manure in a field, that's a practice that you use. There should also be a field stacking map that identifies hopefully areas that meet state and federal requirements for stacking manure. So that should show up on a map if that's something that you're doing. And those are all the maps. So again, part of what you need to do with your technical assistance is make sure all the maps are there and they're correct. Okay, that the fields that you're putting into the nutrient management plan are represented on the map and accurately. Okay, it's really important. Sometimes there are buffers where there don't need to be buffers. Sometimes there's a field stack where you're not actually stacking manure. Sometimes there's a well indicated where there is no well. These maps are used, you know, when somebody comes out and starts looking at your farm. So make sure they're accurate. Work with the person that created the maps to make sure they reflect, you know, what's really happening in that field and on your farm. All right, so that is your first piece of homework, to make sure the maps are there and they're also correct. Okay. Second piece, the soil fact sheets. I've mentioned those. This will be the third time now. The soil fact sheets are in your binder. They will go behind the soil information tab, right? And again, there should be a fact sheet that represents each soil type found on your farm. So here's just an example of an Enosburg loamy fine sand with a 0 to, I can't see the top of that, 3% slope. It describes the soil, as you can see in the top paragraph, and then utilizes information from this fact sheet to build your plan. So some of the information that will be used as we build your plan are things like the drainage class. Okay, how well does this soil drain? Is it really heavy clay? Is it light sand? Because that's going to impact nutrient loss and nutrient availability. So we need that information to try to develop as accurate of a recommendation as we can, right? Now, when you're running Go Crop, this information gets automatically drawn in to the program. You don't actually have to enter it. It'll all come in once you put the soil type for that field. All right, so once you put the soil type, everything else populates for you. In the old days, you had to enter it in all by hand. But again, there's a good amount of this information, like the drainage class, the erosion factor, all pieces that we use to build the plan. Here's just another example. This is a Cabot, extremely stony fine sandy loam, and just different things to point out. Here, I'll go back here. On the Enosburg, if you go down to the bottom, you can see agricultural yield data. So these are kind of average yields that this soil is known to produce of these different types of crops. If you go to the Cabot, extremely stony, you can see apparently you shouldn't be growing any crops there. Must be terrible. Anybody have that soil type? Anyway, you can see that it's a hydrologic group D, which is under the water features, which means that it's poorly drained. Okay, it's also a pretty shallow soil. So you can see here it has a T, an erosion factor of 2, which just means that it just can't withstand, we'll talk about this more, T, it just can't rebuild itself very fast. It's a shallow soil, it's not very deep, and it doesn't rebuild as fast as some of the other soils. All right, maps, check the maps. Fact sheets, you should have those. Again, most of the information that you may use from the fact sheets already auto-populate into Go Crop. But you may need to go back to them, especially if you do not keep track of yields very well on your farm and you need to figure out what kind of yield. It's going to ask you for a yield goal, and you need to put something in the box. This could be a value that you use. Right? So the next piece we're going to go over, I said it's going to be light this week. I'm already overwhelmed, so just bear with me. We got one more piece to cover, which is erosion. Okay, so I want you, hopefully you can see this fact sheet. We've got an Enosburg loamy fine sand. You can see the erosion factors up here on the top of the table, and it says it has a T of 5, okay? So T is the tolerable soil loss for this field. So again, tolerable means that if you lose this much soil, it can tolerate that loss and be able to rebuild itself kind of as fast as the soil is being lost. So the higher the T level, right, the tolerable loss, usually the deeper the soil, the better the soil it is. So tolerable means that in this case, you can lose 5 tons of soil per acre per year. And theoretically, this field, this soil type will be able to regenerate itself fast enough to sort of keep up with that level of loss. It is a requirement of the state of Vermont for all agricultural fields to meet T. So the way that you manage the field cannot result in soil loss that exceeds, in this case, 5 tons of soil per acre per year. That is the law for every farm, every field, okay? So what we do is use a computer model to determine how much potential soil loss you could experience from each field on your farm based on management, as well as slope, precipitation, the weather, etc. But we can't change the slope and we cannot change the weather, but you can change management. So if your management is resulting in a soil loss that exceeds T for the soil type on that field, we need to change what you're doing to meet T. That is the law, okay? So if you have a soil like this, you can lose 5 tons, up to 5 tons. Do you want to do that? No, not a good idea, okay? If you're on a stony, extremely stony, sandy loam Cabot, you can see you can only lose 2 tons. So depending on the soil type, right, how much soil can be lost varies, which also means how those fields are managed will have to vary, right? I'm pretty sure on this field, you're not going to be growing continuous corn, probably no corn at all. And by the looks of it, you probably don't want to anyway, okay? Or maybe you can, but it's only a year worth of corn. Or maybe you can, but if you're growing corn, you got to have a cover crop, okay? So you need to meet T. That is the requirement. So again, I mentioned we use a computer program. I say we, I mean the land treatment planners, NRCS. They're the ones that will run your information through this program called RUSLE2. Okay. And essentially, hopefully, you know, they have met with you, gained some information about how you manage fields, and they'll put that into the program. And they'll look at the soil loss, okay, for each field on your farm, okay, on a year-to-year basis and across the rotation. So RUSLE2 really captures sheet erosion and rill erosion. I'm sure most of you have seen these, okay. But it does not cover gully erosion. Clearly, this isn't in Vermont, but we do have gully erosion in Vermont, and we can't predict that kind of erosion. If you have this kind of erosion, you need to seek help. You definitely shouldn't have this kind of soil loss in your fields. And I have seen this in Vermont. Okay, so again, just looking at different types of soil loss and what we're trying to minimize here. Okay, and the information that goes into the program to calculate potential loss, climate, soil topography, and land use. Right, so how you manage those fields has a really significant influence on erosion loss. So I just went through what is T. Here's an example of it again. This is a Munson silt loam, okay, with a 3 to 8% slope. This is T circled over in the corner. For this particular soil type, if you have this on your farm with this slope, You're only going to be able to lose 2 tons of soil per acre per year. And what kind of management are you going to have to put into place to make sure that happens? Here's a rhenum silt loam. Again, 2 tons on the last one, 5 tons on this soil. I want to say it's, I guess, more forgiving. Right? So again, these numbers have been calculated for you. I said at the beginning, you need to have the RUSLE2 numbers. That's what I was talking about. Okay, so these are run through the computer program and you should have a printout. I'm hoping that that's made it your way. And that printout should be behind the risk assessment tab. Just check on that before I make that statement. If it's not there, your land treatment planner will help you locate it, but it should look something like this. Okay. You should have, depending on how many fields you have, how complicated your farm is, how many soil types you have. You may have 1 piece of paper and you may have 20 pieces of paper. Okay. So here's an example. I'll just go through this. Okay, this is an example where you can see that at the top, it shows the track number 782 in the field 1. That particular field has a Buckland loam with a 3 to 8% slope. And the T for that soil type with that slope, okay, so what you can lose is 3 tons per acre per year. That's the allowable loss. So below that, it shows you the current rotation. This is what the farm is currently doing. 5 years of corn, 5 years of hay. And below that is an alternative. 3 years of corn, 6 years of hay, okay, with some different management in there. You can see the white circle around the planned soil loss. Okay, so based on this current rotation, it's estimated that 4.3 tons of soil will be lost per acre per year. And it doesn't meet T, which is 3. So we need to do something different. You got to meet T. All right. So an alternative was proposed. And the alternative has a soil loss of 2.1 tons of soil per acre per year. And that is acceptable. So again, if you have a field where what you're currently doing does not meet T, you're going to need to shift the management so that you meet T, and hopefully in a way that you develop, right? I mean, hopefully the land treatment planner worked with you to come up with those alternatives. And if it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, then you need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a solution that works, that you're going to implement. Okay. That's really important. Don't just say you're going to do something and then not implement it, because again, if you're being inspected, they'll be looking for this. Okay. The other piece on the RUSLE2 sheet is over in the corner. You can see year 1 to year 9 here. So this is showing soil loss for each year in that 9-year rotation. All right. So you have to meet T. Your rotation has to meet T, which it does if you pick the alternative. Okay, 2.1. When you build your plan, and we're looking at phosphorus risk, we use the year that you're in rotation to determine that risk. That's why each year's soil loss is presented over here in the corner. So you will need that information. Again, each year in the rotation does not need to meet T, but the average across the rotation does. When you build your nutrient management plan, you will include the soil loss for each year in the rotation because it gets used to determine the risk of losing phosphorus. Okay. All right, so one last example. If you are an all grass farm, or if you have a lot of grass fields or pastures, oftentimes you'll only be provided one soil loss number. And so you may be looking around for lots of sheets, but you may only get one number, okay? Generally, hay fields and pastures, especially if they're permanent and not a part of a rotation, have very, very low soil loss. So you'll only be provided one number essentially for the worst case scenario. So what's the worst soil loss you might see on a permanent hay or pasture field? And you can see here it's very, very low. It's 0.57, right? Okay. Again, just another example of what a RUSLE2 form might look like. You can see over here, it's a Munson silt loam. You can, you have a T of 2. And then over to the right, you can see all these different options to meet T. The first two options do not meet T. Okay, the first option is 3.43 tons of soil loss. Second option is closer, but still 2.62. And the third option meets T. Now, again, it's really about, will you do this third option, right? Can you put this into place? So ultimately, you need to find a rotation and practices that you're going to implement to meet T. All right. Ooh, thank goodness. Thanks. All right, that's it for today, which was a lot. So let's recap very quickly. Maps. Need to go through the maps, make sure you have them all and they're accurate. And the fields that are going to be in the plan are represented on the maps. Okay. Soil fact sheets, you don't really need to look through them and match them up to your soil types. You know, they just need to be in your binder. Again, you may use them for some information down the line, but otherwise they just need to go in the binder. Third, RUSLE2 numbers, what I just went over. Okay. You need to make sure that your rotations, if you have a rotation, okay, if you're all grass, you meet T. I can't imagine you don't, right? But if you are growing row crops or you have rotations with row crops and grass, you need to make sure that each field on your farm meets T. That's your homework. You got to go through all those papers and make sure you have a viable option. And if you don't, we need to go back and work with the land treatment planner to figure that out. And we need to do that right away, because it will be the basis of your whole plan. Okay, we can't wait till class 5 to do that. It needs to be done, you know, within the next week or so. So that is your homework. Okay, we do want to get you into Go Crop today, and that's what you're going to do in the next 30 minutes with your technical assistants. Okay, so we're going to get you into Go Crop. Hopefully an account has been created, or you've created an account. If not, we'll go through that process. There is a little bit of work to do in Go Crop this week, but it's very, very minimal. So you should be able to finish it in the next 30 minutes, right? Getting through all that other stuff might take a little time over the next week. So has everybody, I don't know if everybody's logged into GoCrop, but it's pretty easy to find on the internet. It's just www.gocrop.com. Okay. And when you get to it, let's get that thing off of my screen. All right, here we go. I'm gonna go here. www.gocrop.com. Boom. There it is. Okay.
Hey, Heather,
Yep.
you're still sharing your presentation screen.
Oh. Okay. Thank you for telling me that.
While Heather's bringing that up, I'm just going to take this opportunity to remind folks that when you are signing up, you will get a confirmation email sent to your email address. Please go ahead and make sure you go to that email address and click that confirmation email. If you use a Gmail account, it's not necessarily going to be in your inbox. It might not even be in your spam, and it might be in the all mail folder. So I've gotten a couple calls just this last week about confirming emails from accounts that were set up years ago. So please just make sure that that's something that's done ahead of time, so we're not scrambling later to do that.
Thanks, Lindsay. All right, so if you haven't logged in, again, www.gocrop.com, you just come here, sign up or sign in, you know, so if you already have an account, you sign in. If you haven't signed up yet, that's what you're gonna do today with your team. All right, so I'm gonna go back here because I just made this account this morning for my farm. And so when you hit sign up, it'll basically ask you a bunch of questions to get your account created. And it's going, you know, I put my home address here because I'll be using my own farm to work through this plan with us. And you can see when you type in your address, it actually pulls up this map that locates your farm. So that's my farm there in Alberg. And then you can see below here, it's got a bunch of information about license, record years, importing data, downloading data, and users. Okay.
Hey, Heather,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but the screen that I'm seeing is just the gocrop.com. I'm not on your dashboard. I'm not sure.
Yep.
That's okay. Great. Sorry.
Nope. Thank you. No, I didn't know that. I'm sharing a new screen. There we go. Do you see it now?
Yep. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. All right. So again, once you log in and create an account, this is what's going to pop up. You're going to have your GoCrop account now. It's going to give your address over here in the corner, county, etc., the location of your farm. It's going to have a license information, and you can go through that in your breakout. Record years, again, what you'll have is 2022. And I just want to remind everybody that's working in the breakout rooms to make sure you add a 2021 year, just a reminder for folks, because much of your data, probably your soil tests, manure tests, are all from 2021. So you have to create that year to hold that data. So just a reminder for folks. And then you can see below there, you can import data, which we will be doing. You can download your data if you want into a CSV file. You can add other users. So if you have other people on the farm that you want to use the account, you can do that as well. You can have up to 5 users, you know, that can use GoCrop, they can keep records, etc. And that's something, again, you can ask more questions about once you get in your breakout session. All right. So once you create the account, this is where you'll come to your dashboard. GoCrop is really easy to navigate. So you can see over here, there's a farm, there's a field, there's this little spreadsheet called reporting tools. And then there's add records. Today, we're going to go to reporting tools. And we are going to create a 2022 Vermont NMP. So what you want to do today is add a new NMP. All right, and your homework is to basically fill out the farm information to start the NMP. So you can very basic information. Okay, it's the crop year. You're creating a plan and it's going to put in today's date, the farm name, how many years you've been farming, who manages the farm. It might be the same person. Who's your planner? Okay, that would be me. And that information you should be able to access from the technical assistants in your group. I'm going to type it in here right now so I can move through this. Okay. See a save button? I would recommend, if you filled something out, to save it in case, who knows, right? The power goes out or something, you don't lose everything. Okay, so that's the basic information. And then it has, once you save that, you can see all the other information that I want you to fill out today. All right, so you need to create a narrative for the plan, which talks about your farm, just a brief description and plans for the future. So if you're planning to expand or planning to transition the farm or etc., just a little description about the farm. Typical rotation. Again, these are all just general information about your farm. If you're all grass, you say we're an all grass farm. If you grow corn, you can say, well, you know, we're mostly grass and we have about 100 acres of corn and we rotate that approximately every 6 years with hay, something like that. And then it says yield determination method. How do you determine yields on your farm? I'm going to tell you right now, do not say, I based it on last year's yields. Well, how did you determine last year's yields? How do you determine yields on your farm? Or how do you wish you did it, right? Do you count the number of bales that you harvest? Do you keep track of the number of loads of silage you harvest? You know, how to determine yields? This is very important. You need, if you're not doing something now, you need to write down what you're going to do to keep track of yields on your farm. If you have nothing, then you can say, this year we're going to use the soil fact sheet information. But in the future, we will be doing this. Manure, so it's going to ask you about your manure management. Okay, again, this is in general. Tillage, if you till, what do? You know, is it no-till? Is it moldboard plow, chisel plow? If you're all grass, permanent, say that. Watershed, hydrologic code, and if it's impaired. Remember, this comes off that map. All right, the map that I showed you. Land, total owned, total lease, tillable, owned and leased, permanent hayland, owned and leased, permanent pasture, owned and leased, woodland. Okay. Land treatment planners sometimes will have calculated this for you, and other times you need to calculate that on your own, but the information needs to be in GoCrop. And then a livestock inventory. If you are a livestock farm, you need to fill this out. There's actually a couple of parts to it, which your technical assistants will walk you through. But, you know, if you're not a dairy farm, you just say no, and then you can select other livestock. You know, there's a whole list. If you are a dairy farm, it'll ask you some other questions. It'll ask you about animal types, how many animals you have, all that kind of information. Okay. So for this week, the items that I asked you to look through and confirm, correct, make sure you have, are the maps, right? Soil fact sheets and RUSLE2. And then in the next 30 minutes, you should be able to complete this first GoCrop information. All right. And if not, you can do it during the week. So at this point, we're gonna go into breakout rooms.